Hello everyone, here I'm going to explain about Victorian age through the eye of literature. Brief history. Victorian era in British history, the period between approximately 1820 and 1914, corresponding roughly but not exactly to the period of Queen Victoria's reign, 1837 until 1901. This era is characterized by the expanding horizons of education and literacy, as well as by an increased desire of the people to question religion and politics. As reading became less of a privilege of the wealthy and more of a pastime of the common British citizen, publications such as periodicals flourished. These magazines provide monthly installments of news articles, satiric essays, poetry, and fiction. These serious publications enabled by many authors to easily share their work with the public and help launch the careers of prominent Victorian writers such as Dickens and Thackeray. Victorian age was an era of great political, social, economic, and religious activities. This age stood witness to the growing economic rift between the poor and the rich. The scientific discoveries and inventions shook the faith of people on God and religion. Literature was an accessible and pervasive part of Victorian society. Most of the Victorian literary works reflect social aspect of life, just like William Blake's poem, The Chimney Sweeper.
When my mother died, I was very young, and my father saw me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in sooth I sleep.
From the piece above, we can see how children were used for chimney sweeping due to their diminutive size that enabled them to fit into the very narrow and enclosed spaces that required cleaning inaccessible to an adult. Chimney was an icon in this era since there was an industrial revolution in this era. Climbing boys and sometimes girls too were reliant on the so-called master sweep for employment, clothing, and food. The young children were referred to as a kind of apprentice, learning the craft as it were, whilst the adult sweep had complete control over their lives. Very often, those that had been sold by their parents had even signed papers securing the master sweep status as their legal guardians, meaning these young children were tied to their master and their professions until adulthood with no route to escape. Whilst the climbing boys had become such a prevalent sight in modern industrial Britain, their spectre lives on today through literature and cultural representations, perhaps giving a more light-hearted depiction of what was sad and cruel reality of young children victimized by their poverty and trapped by their circumstances. Victorian age is known as the age of prose. Matthew Arnold stated that the 18th century was the age of prose and reasons. It is called so because no good poetry was written at that age and poetry itself became prosaic. On the other side, there are a lot of good prose born in this era. Though there's no good poetry was written in this era, there are still some poetry considered beautiful from the era, such as The Sons of Dee by Charles Kingsley, Chimare by Rosamund M. Watson, The Fairy Child by Lord Dunsay,
The Sons of Dee by Charles Kingsley. Oh Mary, go and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home. Across the Sons of Dee, the western wind was wild and dank with foam, and all alone went she. Chimera by Rosamund Watson. The spring sun shows me your shadow, the spring wind bears me your breath. You are mine for a passing moment, but I'm yours to the death. The Fairy Child by Lord Dunsany. From the low white walls and the church steeple, from our little fields under grass or grain, I'm gone away to the fairy people. I shall not come to the town again.
No matter how beautiful are the poetries above, it's still not as beautiful as Shakespeare's sonnets, but it is proof that this age has so many great prose and its authors. Here are some of the big authors in the era. The first, Charles Dickens, 2nd William Makepeace Thackeray, 3rd George Eliot, 4th Emily Bronte, and 5th Anthony Trollope. From some of the authors above, Charles Dickens and Thackeray were two of the great authors in the era. Each of them had their own style of writings, just like Dickens with his humors and Thackeray with his satirical works. Charles Dickens, born on February 7, 1812. He is an English novelist generally considered the greatest of the Victorian era. Much drawn to the theater, Dickens nearly became a professional actor in 1832. He wrote many books, including Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol. Dickens was a master of high humor, satire, pun, wordplay, and a curious method of characterizing that poked fun at his own creation even as he fleshed them out with his life and a persona all their own. Here are some of his literary works, such as Oliver Twist, A Tale of Two Cities, and the famous A Christmas Carol. We are going to talk about Oliver Twist. It's Dickens' second novel, was published as a serial from 1837 to 1839. The novel follows the journey of a titular character, Oliver Twist. Oliver, an orphan since birth, spends much of his childhood at a child farm orphanage with too many children and too little food. One of the main themes of all Charles Dickens novels was how the poorest people in society were treated the worst. This is one of the key themes in Oliver Twist, where we can see the failure of the workhouse system that was unable to look after the poor and lonely orphans that were in their care. William Thackeray, born on July 18, 1811. He was an English novelist of the 19th century. He was famous for his satirical works, particularly Vanity Fair, a panoramic portrait of English society. In the late 1830s, Thackeray became a notable contributor of articles on varied topics to Fraser's magazine, the new monthly magazine, and later to his Punch. His work was unsigned or written under such pen names as Mr. Michael Angelo Titmarsh, Fitzboodle, the Fat Contributor, or E.K. Solomons. Here are some of his literary works: Vanity Fair, Pendennis, and The Luck of Barry Lyndon. Talking about Vanity Fair novel of early 19th century English society by William Makepeace Thackeray, published serially in monthly installments from 1847 to 1848 and in book form in 1848. A novel that chronicles the life of two women who could not be more different: Becky Sharp, an orphan whose only resources are her vast ambition, her native wit, and her loose morals, and her schoolmate Amelia Sedley, a typical naive Victorian heroine the pampered daughter of a wealthy family. Generally considered to be his masterpiece, Vanity Fair is Thackeray's resplendent social satire that exposes the greed and corruption raging in England during the turmoil of Napoleonic Wars. Thank you for watching. To close this video, here is one of Thackeray's quote from his book Vanity Fair. Which of us is happy in this world? Which of us has his desire, or having it is satisfied?
For further readings, you can check the materials on the websites above.